Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim, and we are doing a podcast with Nayeli and Lexi today. So we have quite a few questions for Nayeli, so we're going to discuss them.
Yes. So I noticed the questions you guys sent me. But the first thing to say from my perspective as the tutor of the unit is that I found uh, usually at the end of the class, people come to me with really good questions. And
Mhm.
sometimes not everybody is aware of these questions. And my thoughts are that maybe other people have these really good questions, and it will be a good idea to talk about them in a podcast. Um, so yes, so I understand that, Lexi, you have questions about, you know, how to manage probably our readings that we do in the different weeks. And Kim, you have more questions about the content of the unit, language learning and technology. Shall we start with Lexi?
Okay, hi everyone, I'm Lexi. I have some questions about Nelly about the course because I have a different education system in China. So I may have a little confused about some things about our course. So the first question is there any specific knowledge we need to learn from our readings? Or do we just need to find what we are interested in?
That is a good question. A lot of students do struggle thinking, well, especially as if you're used to different kind of tradition of learning, um, the idea of finding things that you think or consider important is a bit scary, especially when for instance, I speak from my experience back in Mexico. We were given the textbook in order to remember everything in the textbook. It was kind of
Yes.
memorize this because this is
Yeah.
important. Whereas in the UK, it's different. You are free to decide what's important to you, what's relevant to your experiences. And that's where we're coming from when we assign you to read particular texts, articles, name them chapters. So the idea that you as an adult that is a professional that is working already or has had this work experience, that you could choose and say, okay, I'll read a text, and you making that decision of, oh, this is relevant to me. There's no right or wrong answer in how we read, or what's important to you might be different to what's important to another person. And that's fine. That, I think, sometimes is a bit
Mhm.
of, is that okay? It could be like a shock for people who are used to a different system like I was. But yes, you are free to, when you read, to decide what's important to you. And that you read that is important is what becomes the key topic for you. And it is different. It might be different to what other people read. That's why we do a lot of, you know, I put you a lot of to work in as a group. So when you come and
Mhm.
discuss, what do you read? If you all read the same reading, let's just put an example. Somebody says, "Oh, I read this." Oh, okay. Somebody else says, "Oh, I read this other thing." And then you're thinking, oh, they understood the reading from a different perspective, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that what I read or what is important to me is wrong. It's just that we are speaking about the same material from different perspectives, and I think that's why group work is relevant, and that's why we work as we work, as study groups. Talk to each other. What do you find? and and share your thinking.
Mhm. But sometimes it comes a habit of old educational system. A little afraid of I will miss some important points you want us to notice. So how can I know I don't miss them?
Well, as I said, there's no right or wrong way of looking at readings, and we need to move away from thinking, oh, there should be an important point. in this meeting, because there is, for example, if you ask the person who wrote that chapter or that article, for that person, everything is important. So if, again, we're talking about our own experiences and what I consider to be interesting. So there's really no, if we focus on this perspective, there's no way you're going to miss anything, because you will say what matters to you. And that's where we start our readings. In week 9 and 10, we're going to start thinking about the assignment. And then people need to start thinking about, what topics were important to them.
Mm.
And then they're going to start making decisions. Okay, what can I read? Where do I start to explore this topic? And it's going to be impossible for you to read everything. And that's what I say. And I said this in the very beginning. You don't have to read everything word by word and understand everything. Just pick and choose, be selective. Okay, I'm reading this, I'm reading that. Because otherwise you won't be able to write anything. If you think, I need to cover as much papers as I can, then you're going to spend a lot of time reading and less time writing about the topic.
Yes.
That's why we practice week by week, making decisions, making choices. So there's really no way you're going to miss anything, because if you trust in what's important to you, that's where you need to start. And then, yes, move away from, I need to memorize, I need to remember everything, because that's not really the purpose of, the readings we do.
I get it. And now I understand the readings is not specific. They don't have a specific purpose. They just give us an introduction and let us to explore what we really interested in.
Exactly. So I'm glad you said that, because the readings are introductions to a topic. And if you're interested in the topic, then it is always very explicit in Blackboard. If you're interested in this topic, you can read, and then I give you a list of more things to explore. And yes, so from the introduction, then you move to explore, to a deeper exploration. Just if you're interested. Again, you don't have to. That's the beauty of giving autonomy, which is, I think, a topic later on we're going to explore as well.
Yeah. Okay, let me move to another question, which we have talked about. Do we need to try to use more academic words for the final assessment, or could we use simpler words if we think they can express our ideas better?
That's a very good question, because a lot of students do start their writing thinking, I need to show all my academic skills, academic writing skills. We need to understand that writing is a process, and we might start writing simple English, but the more we read, the more we start internalizing the terminologies that are used in the readings, and then we start using them. I always say, if you want to start your writing just, with simple ideas, you then can come back to what you wrote earlier and then add to the ideas, shape and reshape. And it's a drafting and redrafting process. I, from experience, I have seen, and students have told me, I spent a lot of time looking at the blank screen, or that one page that is the blank, because I don't know what to start, where to start and how to start. And I always say, just write anything that comes to your mind, and then you'll come back to it, and then you can edit it, you can make it more academic. But if you start from the simple bits and pieces and your simple thoughts, then you can then work on them to make them more academic. That's a process. It's a spiral process. It's not just like, I'm going to start writing perfectly and finishing my paper perfectly. And a lot of students do think, I need to start writing perfectly from the beginning. And that then takes a lot of time because they're spending years trying to formulate the perfect grammatical sentence rather than let me write first my thoughts and then I'll come back to them and I'll reformulate and reshape my writing. So again, I think it comes from what perspective, where you're coming from when you start your writing, what's your processes. The idea of drafting, redrafting, editing is the approach where I'm saying, you start from simple to then make it more academic. And you as the students doing these assignments, you need to find then the way of how do I start from my own experience, what has worked for me, and can I apply this? And yeah, that's kind of the processes.
Okay, thank you. The last question is from some classmates. They want to know about do the practices we do in tutorials, like the wiki page, will influence our final score?
The practices that we do on Wednesdays and the tutorials are basically to explore different technologies.
Mm-hmm.
I am very aware that 1 hour is not enough.
Yeah, yes.
But as we introduce an idea, again, the idea of introducing something then for you to explore later on in your independent learning is important to recognize that through the presentation and the doing, that idea of practicing doing something is because as you do things, then you start actually realizing, is this something I could apply in my context? Maybe no, maybe yes, but you won't know the answer until you start implementing those practices in somewhere. So the idea of start working with a wiki and see how it works, then you could think, oh, is it something I can do later on? How have we worked around this tool? And the only way to say and take those decisions is by doing a bit of practice. They're not part of the final score, but they are part of the formative assessment. So the idea that through the wiki, I can see what you do. I can see and learn about your context, and also I give you feedback on what the different things that you produce. Is that then so you have that critical friend who's giving you feedback on your work for future development. And that's another idea that is part of the culture and collaborative culture when we are practitioners and being open to receive feedback in order to go, oh, okay, maybe I can improve in this way. Somebody I receive, even if it's peer feedback or tutor feedback, you will learn from others. And that's, if we go back to the ideas of sociocultural approaches to learning, that's again part of the pedagogical grounds for this unit, to make sure that you are receiving formative feedback, which is formal, but it is not part of the final assessment.
Okay, thank you, Nayeli.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Who's next? How about you, Kim?
Yes, thank you, Lexi, for your questions. And I do learn a lot from listening Nayeli's response to her questions as well. So as for me, I have more questions regarding the content that are being taught in class. So my first question is actually comes from, I believe the second seminar we have. So I wonder how reading strategies that we have been talking about could help students to develop, their digital literacy skill.
Yes. So if we go back to the materials, for instance, in that week 2, and we started talking about, reading skills and the relevance of teaching our students to evaluate information, to assess information, to then think about how they can work with specific information, which is what we want. Really, as teachers, we want our students to be able to understand a language in a way in which they can get involved, they can voice their opinions, they can participate in policies, communication, just by the fact that we want them to be able to interact with others. That's our main goal. And we've seen these days, with social media, for example, their students are so, in contact, in proximity with different contexts, not only where they live, but they can be closely interacting with contexts where English is used, through social media, for instance. And what we want is for them to be able to engage and participate in communication, in discussions, but do it in a way that is critical. And those reading skills that we teach, and strategies that we teach as scheming, scanning, bottom up, top to bottom, bottom up, top to bottom. Yeah, I'm just going. Yes. Through those strategies, we want them to be able to evaluate that information and make meaningful decisions. And that's how we help comprehension skills. We help them to enhance their interdependence in what decisions they make with the information they have at hand, and how they interact in society with other people using a different language. Those are the main purposes of, teaching a language. That's how these two ideas are connected. Through reading skills, we do help them to become more critical, understand the digital culture, any way in which they understand how they can collaborate with other people. And that's the main purpose, really.
Well, thank you, Nayeli. I see now. So yeah, I definitely agree that it is important for students to learn how to navigate in the what we call like the information overflow, which is happening on the internet. So it's definitely a part of digital literacy. So yeah, I understand it now.
Yes.
So my second question for us today is, what do you think about autonomy-focused learning? And do you think that is suitable for everyone or in every classroom?
I think as teachers, and this goes back to who we are as teachers and what's important to us, going back to the idea of being aware of what kind of teacher, what beliefs do I have, and how are these beliefs influencing my decision making, my decision processes. So the meaning making I make as I am designing a class, who I am, what I believe, my assumptions about a context will inform my lesson plan, for instance. So being aware of what things are important to you and how these things are shaping your teaching, I think is the main or the key question that we should all be asking ourselves. So from my personal point of view, if you ask me, is autonomy important? I would say yes, because after having experienced and live in a context such as Mexico, where parents, anyone who's older than you is seen as an authority, and you should, as a younger person, you should follow them and obey what they say, where there's very limited freedom, let's say, up until you're an adult, and that what is an adult. That is also, it changes from context to context. So in Mexico, you're 22 years old and you're still considered to be, not adult enough. And then after living for more than 12 years in the UK, where I have learned that people here are very independent, they do take their own decisions, and they rationalize their own decisions. I realized that then autonomy, after experiencing it and getting the benefits of it, I thought, oh, that is important. Did I ever include autonomy in my classes back in Mexico? Now that I think about it, yes. And I did it purposefully because I wanted students to be critical thinkers. I didn't know that then. I didn't know anything about critical thinking. I didn't know anything, but I wanted my students back in Mexico to experience choice, to be able to have some control in their learning. And so I gave them different options. I used to work a lot with projects, students engaging in developing their own materials and their own outputs for them to then present them to different groups of other students in different years. And they were deciding what kind of projects they wanted to work on after I gave them some choice. And I didn't know that was, being, autonomous focused in that sense. But yes, if you ask me, for me, autonomy is important because it helps to promote, it fosters critical thinking skills, it fosters analytical skills, and it helps people to recognize that what's important to them is valuable. And as a mother as well, now that I'm thinking, as a mother, I do foster autonomy in my child. So for instance, this morning, I went through a drawer with different clothing, and I was asking him what he wanted to wear. He's just 21 months old. And he was choosing. He went, no, no, no. And he chose the clothing that had this cars, different colors. And then he went, this. And I went, good. And that is giving them choice rather than me here. This is what you're going to wear today, whether you like it or not. He's learning to make his own decisions based on what he likes and he's interested in. So yes, for me as a teacher, autonomy then would be important. But I think this depends on every individual.
Well, thank you, Nayeli. I think it's really interesting to get to know, your teaching experience and how the culture is in your home country, which is Mexico, right? I think part of the reason I'm interested in this question is because I noticed that students, say from an Asian background, might not be that willing to actively engage in autonomy learning. So sometimes I find that students are more comfortable if you let them know, like if you have like a clear objective or a thing that you ask them to do so that they can follow. So sometimes I wonder like whether this is like really suitable for everyone. But I guess you're right. So it really depends on the individuals. But yeah, I can see
I
why
think what
is
you're
it so
saying,
important.
I think what you're saying as well is very, very, very important because, so, you know, the expectations, student expectations. So as they are coming from different academic contexts, and even within the UK, in different schools work differently. And some students that are local students have come to this university saying, oh, this is so different from my my high school and my previous BA, where we were told step by step. And sometimes there could be a misunderstanding because they might think, oh, the objectives are not clear, but are they not clear? Or are you expecting something different? Because if I think about my unit, language learning and technology, the every pre-task, in-task materials, if you read them carefully, there's guidance, but the guidance is an open guidance where I say, read this chapter and think about key ideas, and that is giving guidance. However, it's not a broken, I'm not breaking it up into different tasks, because again, the idea of autonomy is important to me. Therefore, that impacts how I design my classes. And I start giving students choices from the beginning. And that is scary if you're not used to it. And you might think, oh, I have no direction. There's no guidance at all. And is there not? Or is there's some guidance, but you cannot see it because your expectation is different? And I have seen this through the 10 years I've been here, that by week 6, week 7, they're used to it. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's all right. And they accept it. And that's part of the adjustment time. Then by second semester, they will encounter different units that are probably, different and with less guidance, and they will be used to that already. So it's also part of adjusting to the different ways of working, the different academic culture. When you write your assignments, you need to be autonomous. When you write your dissertation, you need to be autonomous. And if you are not getting that autonomy and practicing it over time, that it could be really difficult at the end of the year.
I absolutely agree. So I do think that like setting up expectations, that's really a role of the teacher, right? So
Yeah.
I still have one more questions,
Yes.
but do you think we have time?
Yeah, I
Should
think we do have a couple of minutes.
Okay. So my last question today is why should language teachers care whether tutorial software, which we have discussed earlier, is behaviorist or not when it is so widely adopted?
I think teachers who use tutorial call software should use it purposefully. So they need to be aware of what the software does, but most important, what their learning outcomes are and how they're using it in order to achieve their learning outcomes. Whether if it's behaviorist or not, I think we have discussed this in class when we looked at, it's really is a myth. If a teacher is who designs the tasks or who chooses those pre-designed tasks purposefully, and that's the key word we need to focus on. As long as these are purposeful activities that will help you achieve a language learning outcome, then if it's behaviorist or not, if it's a myth or not, is out of question. The focus should be on how you use technology to achieve that language outcome. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's it then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for doing this and spending some time with me, extra time of your busy lives as students. And I hope we can do more of these podcasts later on in the year. We'll say goodbye now, and thank you for joining everyone who's listening to us. Bye.
Thank you for answering our question.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.